What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Hoof Podcast. It's Thursday night, ladies and gentlemen. 1 week to go until the 2024 NFL Draft. It's me, Anthony Romeo. You'll notice today that Eric is not here right now. He is out for family reasons, all exciting, all good, so no worries there, but he will be back. However, I am excited to have joining me today Akeem. We are going to be live with each other next week doing the draft. So you all have to tune in with us. You'll hear me talk about that throughout the night here. But while we're prepping for that, we've got a great show for you tonight. We are going to go through a full round one mock draft where we pick for all of the teams, all of the players, without trades for the first part, but we will discuss potential trades. But we're really excited to get into this. I know we've both done this probably 1,000 times preparing for this, but now you get to go through it and talk about position by position. So, Akeem, thank you for joining me. How you doing? How's your day been? What are you doing to count down the days for the draft?
Rich, Akeem Richens. If you don't know us by now, please get to know us. We are built in Buffalo. I am honored, first of all, Anthony, to join you on the Huff Podcast. This is our first time connecting, and
Yeah.
I'm just ecstatic to be on. And draft time is like, I don't know about you, but draft time is like Christmas Day to me. The kids get to celebrate Christmas. Well, this is my Christmas where we're counting down and we are about to celebrate the new faces for the Buffalo Bills. So I'm just excited for the whole experience.
Absolutely, man. I feel the same way. I was just telling my wife today, like, man, the draft is next week. And she's a football fan by default, a Bills fan for me, but not really, into it all that much. So she doesn't quite understand. When we first started dating, she couldn't understand that somebody cared about sports as much as I did. So even today, still 12 years later in our relationship, she's like, what, who cares? Isn't it? It's not the season. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. It's football. This is there's the Super Bowl and then there's draft time and then there's week one and the regular season. And that's, the biggest times of the year. So, yeah. And she also doesn't understand how much we prepare for it by looking into all these college players and say, hey, we're ready for this. Let's go. Right. Like, yeah, it's definitely exciting there. So, yeah, anyway, it's draft time, man. I mean, how can you not get pumped about it, right? For every team. I mean, we're a Bills focused show, but you and I both, we know we look at the whole NFL and we think about the whole NFL team by team. So, and Eric and I have been discussing NFL wide stuff for years now on the Hoof. And that makes it even more exciting when you start thinking about the potential scenarios for every team leading up to the Bills pick at 28, or at least where we're at now at 28, and thinking about, not just which guys go off the board, but who's left and the scenarios in the moment of the live draft, which we will get to do together next week, which will be, super exciting for us. But without further ado, I think, let's dive right into it. I'll pull up the mock draft simulator here, and we're using the PFF simulator, and so the default rankings and all that you'll see will be that for PFF if you're tuning in on YouTube. And like I said earlier, we are not going to do trades actively, but we will discuss along the way and kind of at the end, like where we think trades could happen and why, like for which players and which situations. So I'm going to go ahead and fire up the draft machine here.
Let's do it, baby.
All right.
Let's do it, baby.
On the clock, we've got the Chicago Bears, probably the least surprising pick of the entire draft, right? The least anticipation here because we know who it's going to be, right? It's got to be Caleb Williams, the consensus number one overall guy. I'm going to go ahead and press the button already before even discussing it because I know we're all on the same page there. I think any other pick would be a surprise here. Anything to add about Caleb Williams other than what everybody knows, the USC star, the arm, the talent, the prospect? I like to compare him myself to Trevor Lawrence when Trevor Lawrence was coming out as like the next big thing. And now it's Caleb Williams, not the same stylistically, but the same in terms of the hype and the consensus and the, oh my God, this guy's definitely going to be a hit.
Yeah, most definitely. Right. And you're getting rid of Justin Fields. before that trade happened, we would speculate, are the Bears going to get rid of Justin Fields? Are they going to keep Justin Fields and possibly trade the number one pick in back-to-back years? But that obviously wasn't the scenario. Justin Fields goes to Pittsburgh, and I think Caleb Williams comes in as the number one pick in a pretty good situation with those two outside receivers with Moore and Keenan Allen. So, yep, Caleb Williams, that number one pick, I think is consensus.
Yeah. Do you think he has success in his first year there? Do you think he's going to turn it on and pull a?
I think so. I think he has the weapons to do so on the outside.
Yeah.
I like DeAndre Swift as the running back there. Now it's all on Shane Waldron, right? The offensive coordinator. Luke Getsy out. He's in. What kind of playbook, what kind of philosophy is he going to run? If he runs a philosophy that caters to Caleb Williams and what he does best, I think he'll have success year one.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think he could pull a situation like CJ Stroud with his weapons that they've brought in and the picks that they have. I mean, 2 top 10 picks. You've got the best player in this draft. That's an amazing place to be if you're the Chicago Bears, especially what they've already added going into this season. And Justin Fields, I think he'll end up being a starter and playing pretty decently in this next coming season too, even though the Steelers already got Russell Wilson there too. I'm not expecting that to work out as well as it might look right now, but for free, you can't go wrong there. Anyway, we're in draft mode, so let's continue with the draft. Caleb Williams, consensus number 1 pick. However, now at number 2, although I think we would agree that this is probably a quarterback pick, there has been some discussion here on which quarterback will be picked by Washington at number 2 here. Rebuilding franchise literally from the top, new ownership, new coaching, everything. They're bringing in their own style, new quarterback. So do you have a definite, you think who's going to be picked here, or which of the quarterbacks do you think is the best fit in this situation to Washington?
And it's interesting, right? New head coach, or do we want to say retreat coach Dan Quinn? He comes in.
Yeah, technically not new, right?
Right. So he comes in after being the defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys, and now he wants to build his own philosophy. They have a ton of cap space, $43 million. I'm going Drake May here. I'm thinking it's Drake. I'm thinking it's Drake May. I know Jaden Daniels. He's been getting a lot of hype the last couple of weeks. Heisman winner. He can do things with his legs. He can do a multitude of things. But I believe Washington will end up taking Drake May from North Carolina. Who knows? But that's my gut instinct.
I like it because I'm right there with you. Actually, we've been. I'm one who likes to say that the events around the NFL draft after the Super Bowl and as hype gets built up, what you find is it's almost cyclical to me, right? All the hype goes around and, this guy's going to go here, but wait, no, he's falling, but wait, no, he's rising. And we end up right back where we started. And Eric and I, when we started talking about the draft this year, this was one of the conversations we had at number 2, who would go there? And my choice was Drake May. One of the questions we went over is, would there be 2 UNC quarterbacks on the same roster? In fact, there could have been, but obviously Washington decided to move on. And now, I do think Drake May is the fit here for Washington. They could go Jaden Daniels. He won the Heisman. There's hype there. JJ McCarthy is one who's screaming up draft boards somehow. But I don't think he's the fit here. So I do think, in the end, it's going to end up being the same guy who I had mocked there way back when we did our first one, and that is Drake May. And Washington gets their quarterback for the future, quote unquote, but the future is likely now, right? For them too. They're going to, another situation where likely to be starting day one, not quite as nice as the Bears situation, but he's going to learn on the job for sure.
Definitely agree with that. Drake May with the number 2 pick. I like it.
Awesome. Glad we were consensus there. I thought maybe not, but because I've seen all sorts of stuff happening there now. Now, pick number 3, it's the AFC East rival, right? So we definitely got to talk about this. It's the Patriots coming in with the 3rd pick overall here. The needs are clear. And I've heard a lot of buzz as we've gotten closer again with this situation saying that the Patriots want to trade down and that they might be willing to move back in order to wait to get somebody else at quarterback, possibly, rather than one of these top 3. However, my current thought is you're rebuilding. You've got a new coach. You're trying to do things your way. You have to bring in the quarterback that is going to do that for you. And it's possible that the Patriots currently think that, Bo Nix is that guy, and he will be, so they can trade back to later in the round and still get their guy in Bo Nix. However, I think that with a guy like Jaden Daniels still on the board here, they've got to go that direction, right? Where are your thoughts in terms of, do you expect New England to trade out or take their guy here?
Now, I hear a lot of talks about the New England Patriots. Is their roster good or great? None of the above, right? They
Correct.
have a lot of work to do. They entered free agency with the most cap space, and they didn't make any significant moves to upgrade that team. So a lot of people would say, you know what? Why draft a quarterback now? Because that roster is so bad, it's not really helping that quarterback. But what I
Mm-hmm.
say is draft your quarterback now. Go and get your guy now. We don't know what the future holds with quarterbacks later on,
Mm-hmm.
right? We can
Mm-hmm.
only assume. We don't know the draft positioning. We don't know any of those things. What we do know now is that we're drafting number 3 overall, and this is supposedly a pretty doggone good quarterback class. So let me go ahead and get my quarterback now, and he's going to have his struggles and his bumps in the road, but I'm going to let him build and let him play and let him progress, and then I will build around him starting next year. My guy is Jaden Daniels, number 3 pick, New England Patriots.
Absolutely. Another one where we would have to agree, right? If you're the New England Patriots, what are you doing if you don't pick a quarterback here? I mean, what are you going to trade back, get an offensive lineman, get a, defensive lineman? Bill Belichick isn't there anymore, and it's time to move on from that train of thought. You have
Mm-hmm.
a potential franchise quarterback guy in Jaden Daniels who's proven it at the college level. You got the Heisman Trophy. He's gotten all the accolades. You need to now carry him into the future, much like the Buffalo Bills. We drafted Josh Allen when we were in rebuild mode, and we
Mm-hmm.
needed to grow with him. I
Mm-hmm.
think that if New England takes that approach, they'll be in the right footing. And
Mm-hmm.
they might even have a high pick next year even with him, but still you're building around him, letting him learn in the position, on the job, on the field, rather than, like you said, kicking it down the field and hoping that you find a quarterback in later years, because
Right.
that's just not likely to happen, especially when you're in an organization where, how good is it as Bills fans that we look at the Patriots and say nobody
Mm-hmm.
wants to go there all of a sudden, right? You've got all this
Mm-hmm.
money, you're trying to recruit guys, but there's better opportunities at a lot of other teams in terms of winning, trying to get to a Super Bowl, etc. And
Mm-hmm.
they're going to find their footing. And I think that this Jaden Daniels pick at 3 overall is the first big step in that direction to say, yes, we need this. We got to get this going. And this is the position we want to be in, even though we might have to take our medicine in the first year.
Correct. Correct.
So 3 quarterbacks, all in the top 3 picks. I think that is pretty much what many are expecting. Now, this is the NFL draft. Anything can happen at any time. But
Mm-hmm.
those 3 teams, without a doubt, absolutely need a quarterback, which brings us to pick number 4. The Arizona Cardinals. They have Kyler Murray. They've got their franchise guy. They're paying him a
Mm-hmm.
lot of money there. We
Mm-hmm.
see, according to PFF, wide receiver listed as one of their major needs, but that roster could use a lot of boost in too. So although there is, again, talk of, well, this is a potential trade spot, I
Mm-hmm.
think the Cardinals stick and pick, because
Mm-hmm.
my consensus number 1 player in this draft is
Mm-hmm.
Marvin Harrison Jr., and
Mm-hmm.
he's right there for them to pick. And I
Mm-hmm.
could not see them any price that's not willing to fill a major position in need for them. They basically cleared the cabinet at wide receiver, and
Mm-hmm.
now having the best player in the board fall to you at pick 4 is an absolute gift. So I think they absolutely have to pick him here. Do you see it any other way, or is there another trade scenario you think could entice them to move down here?
I mean, it's possible of a trade back, but you're the new coach, second year head coach, Jonathan Gannon, I believe. Kyler Murray is in his second year removed from an ACL injury, so he's
Mm-hmm.
about to ramp up his activity and hope to get back to the player that the reason he was drafted as a number 1 overall pick, right? So they traded Hollywood Brown, they traded Rondell Moore, like you said, getting rid of that wide receiver room, and Kyler Murray needs a go-to player. And why not have the best player possibly in the draft as that go-to player? Let's go ahead and pair up the combination of Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. for the foreseeable future with the number 4 overall pick with the wide receiver.
Absolutely. I think they were, the happiest team coming into this draft, knowing that the top 3 teams all needed quarterback and that they were going to get the best player in the draft, regardless of what position it was, pretty much. And it just so happens to be a position that they need the most on this team, really looking from the outside, at least. All teams want to build in the trenches and all that. You'll hear that from every coach and GM out there. But bottom line is they don't have any wide receivers. And in this league, a passing league, you have your quarterback who you're paying a lot of money. You got to get him the weapons. So it just makes sense there. And along those same lines, I'm going to move to pick 5 here, which is the Chargers coming in with a lot of needs as well. However, new coach, right? He's changed that organization. They have their franchise quarterback. Now it's a matter of, can you build this team the right way to win now? And who's going to do that for you? So I'll let you give your thoughts on what you think, who you think here would be a good fit, or if you think the Chargers are likely to trade down, etc.
I mean, I believe it is a possibility for the Los Angeles Chargers to trade down, depending on how that board falls, depending on if there's a shakeup within those first 3 picks that's not agreeable with what we selected, right? And if that happens, then yes, definitely a trade down possibility. But for this particular draft where we're not trading, I'm looking at the Los Angeles Chargers. I'm looking at what they did this offseason. They got rid of Keenan Allen. They got rid of Keenan Allen. They got rid of Mike Williams. Austin Eckler is gone. That attack and that style of offense is now gone, and now you enter a Jim Harbaugh who loves to smash mouth football. He loves to run the ball and then pass, let the pass set up off the run. And I believe he's a guy that has a guy like Greg Roman. They got Gus Edwards and just signed J.K. Dobbins. He believes in building from the inside out. And because he believes in building from the inside out and loves to run the football, they have to have an offensive lineman to combat that, right? You want to have that offensive lineman to help in run support, and then you want to have that same offensive lineman to protect your franchise quarterback. So I'm thinking the Los Angeles Chargers, if they stay put, they're going to go get one of the best players in this draft, offensive lineman Joe Alt.
I really like that, right? So here's the thing with the Chargers, right? You move on from your 2 biggest wide receivers and you have that good quarterback. The gut instinct is to say, well, they need wide receiver and they're going to go wide receiver. However, I do agree with what you said, right? They brought in Harbaugh, right? Harbaugh is in the trenches stand, right? And he's come out and said he wants to refill at the offensive line position. I think if the board falls like this, they will in fact take Malik Neighbors before they take the tackle. Okay. However, this is the first position that I feel where a trade is more likely to happen, right? Because with Neighbors on the board, with the Giants coming up next, if you're one of the teams that believes that Neighbors or Odunze is your guy, this is where you want to come up above the New York Giants, in my mind, who I'll talk about next. But that is why the Chargers, I think, are in a good position to trade down, still get an offensive lineman, which I agree they need to get, and still end up possibly getting a wide receiver as well to fill that need and start building around. But as you said, I do think Harbaugh wants to build in the trenches. So in this particular order of the draft right now, I'm stuck because I want to pick wide receiver for them.
Go Neighbors then. Go Neighbors.
I just think if this was how the board fell and they had to, I'm going to pick Neighbors for them. I do think that, whoever ends up picking in this spot, if it's the Chargers or not, to me, it will be a wide receiver, and it will probably be Malik Neighbors, unless, one team really feels like they're higher on Odunze and they're coming up for him before the Giants pick here. But yeah, I think the Chargers are like the most likely of the ones so far to trade down. However, if they're there, you got to take Neighbors. That you have such a void at the position of wide receiver now with the level of talent that your quarterback, Justin Herbert, has been playing with in
Mm-hmm.
a Mike Williams, in a
Mm-hmm.
Keenan Allen that are now not there, you
Mm-hmm.
restock with a guy like Malik Neighbors, and it's par for the course. He now has that kind of guy again, younger, faster, has to build that chemistry, but still a good place to be.
I like it.
And on the contrary, you've got the Giants picking next here. There are a lot of rumors you hear about the Giants. You see it up there as a need quarterback. I'm sorry, but I don't believe that whatsoever. I think that would be the wrong move for the
Mm-hmm.
Giants. I think they would be making a huge mistake if they draft a quarterback here. I think that they know better too, right? They know what's there.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying, look, everybody might think we need a quarterback, but we paid Daniel Jones and we put a crap team around him and he didn't do that well, right? Now
Mm-hmm.
we need to pay Daniel Jones, give him the wide receiver that he needs to be able to be a difference maker and say, look, now you got the guy, you got no excuses. You either are the guy, man for us or you're not. And you're going to get paid to be that top level QB or you're not moving forward because there is an out for them after this coming year. So I think the Giants, although there's all this hype around QB, they're going to stick with their guy, Daniel Jones here, and they're
Mm-hmm.
going to draft Rome Odunze and
Mm-hmm.
possibly Neighbors if he's still on the board. But I think that Odunze is the guy here for them. And those wide receivers, the top three, don't make it past 6 because I just feel like, again, if the Chargers are to trade, somebody's coming up for a wide receiver and
Mm-hmm.
or a quarterback, maybe. But I think it's going to be wide receiver in this case because the Giants are not probably picking a quarterback. But in my mind, I strongly believe they're going to go with Odunze. Do you have objections, or can I hit the draft button on that one?
I go ahead and pull the trigger on Odunze. I had Malik Neighbors actually going to the Giants. So
Yeah.
Odunze, I think receivers definitely a need. You pay, like you said, you pay Daniel Jones all that money. It's only right to at least give him the weapons to see if he can be the
Yes.
guy. Let's give him the weapons first. So I think they're in that right direction. I like the offseason that they had. They solidified the offensive line. They got Devin Motor Singletary, got Brian Burns on the edge. They got Little Dirty. So getting a number one receiver would be a good look for the G-men, especially Brian Daboll and if he wants to continue to have a future as the New York Giants head coach.
Exactly, right? I think that's where the problem comes in. Brian Daboll has a lot of pressure on him this year. If that team doesn't perform, he's
Mm-hmm.
going to be one of the big scapegoats there. And if
Mm-hmm.
you're drafting a rookie QB, you're
Mm-hmm.
significantly decreasing your odds of success when you already have a guy in the room who's shown he has flashes, he has the ability to get done. I am not saying that Daniel Jones is going to be some top 5 quarterback in the NFL, but he has what it takes to make big plays, to lead the team, to get it done. And you got to put the weapons around him to make that happen. So I
Mm-hmm.
just firmly believe this is the right move for them. And if they don't make a move like that on draft night and they pick a quarterback, well, you and I are going to discuss it because I'm going to say how
Yes, sir.
stupid it is of Brian Daboll to go ahead and make that move.
Yes,
And
sir.
even though they're former Buffalo Bills staff that are there now,
Mm-hmm.
they would be making a big mistake. So that'll bring us to the next pick, number 7. This is where I would say probably the most consensus pick I've seen in every single mock draft, even more than Caleb Williams at 1, to be honest, before the Fields, was Joe Alt going to Tennessee at this
Mm-hmm.
spot. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they are in desperate need of offensive line help. Tennessee has done a lot to boost that offense. They feel like they're in a good place, but they desperately need to protect Will Levis and get that team going. And I think Alt is the right man for the job there. And you mentioned that if if the Chargers, were to take at 4 or at 5 an offensive lineman, probably Joe Alt, I still think at 7 that they're going to go offensive lineman. We've heard all about how deep the offensive line is, especially the tackle position in this draft. And for our sake in this particular draft, Joe Alt's there, so we'll take him. But what are your thoughts on if Alt is gone, right? I'll pull up the offensive tackles. Who is your number 2 on the board that would be a good fit for the Titans in your mind?
Oh, so if Alt is gone, I'm a big fan of my guy Fashanu from Penn State.
Yeah.
I'm a big guy. I'm a big proponent for him, Big Ten guy. I seriously think that the Tennessee Titans do need to plug and play an offensive tackle. I think they had a strong off season. Will Levis in that rookie contract. You got Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins on the outside. So he got some solid weapons to work with. They got Tony Pollard. Bill Callahan is the first-year head coach. He had a lot of success with the Cincinnati Bengals.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe they just need that offensive lineman that can make a seamless transition, plug and play to continue to reshape and rebuild that offense that they want to see. So I'm going to offensive tackle.
Absolutely. I think I agree with you that Fashanu would be a good matchup here for Tennessee if Alt is off the board.
If Alt was off the board, yes.
But again, when it comes to draft night, if people aren't trading up for the wide receivers, they'll be trading up for the quarterbacks. And I think that Alt is going to be available at 7 for Tennessee, and that match that everybody's seen is going to be made. So that brings us to pick 8 on the clock, the Atlanta Falcons. Do you see this as a potential trade spot? And I think, again, the consensus here, and with our mock draft that we're doing right now, is this where the first defensive player comes off the board?
Actually, if the Atlanta Falcons do stay in that spot, I believe here is where the first defensive player comes off the board. I really like what the Atlanta Falcons did this offseason in terms of getting a quarterback. I know Kirk Cousins is coming off an Achilles injury, and getting that $180 million contract raised some eyebrows, but he brings a stability factor to the Atlanta Falcons quarterback position, and getting Darnell Mooney and trading for Rondell Moore and doing the things they did this offseason. I believe they can now go ahead and start solidifying that defense, more specifically that front seven, and go ahead and get a guy in a premium position. And I have Jarrett Verse as the first defensive player coming off the board for the Atlanta Falcons. I believe they need that pass rushing prowess, that edge prowess, and I think he fits the bill for what the Atlanta Falcons is trying to do. So I would go Jarrett Verse as the pick here.
I like that for them a lot here. You'll see that, PFF is definitely, has their rankings, right? Some people will look here and say, well, you got 2 other guys, Latu and Turner are above that. However, we know with Latu, there's some questions there. Turner could be the pick if they think he's a fit. But I agree with you, actually, that Verse is one of those guys that I think, you got to think about the player and the team match as well as just the overall talent level. I think Verse could be the top defensive talent in this draft right now, and it would not surprise me if that's the direction the Falcons go. So they desperately need to go defense. And I think when you're talking about this high in the draft, you're talking about premium position. You definitely got to get that guy, and Verse to me makes a lot of sense. So we'll go ahead and make him the pick. Now, just to show the board right now, according to PFF, some of the guys at the top: Brock Bowers, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell. Could they go cornerback? Maybe, but that isn't as big of a need for them, I think, as the defensive line right now. And then we already talked about the potential in Latu as a guy there. However, kind of falling down draft boards based on medical situations there, medical issues. Yeah. So we'll see. That brings us to now an interesting pick for sure. Pick number 9. I mean, the story all last season that Eric and I discussed on the Hoof was Chicago being in this absolute insane position to take 2 top 10 players, given that they had their own pick, plus obviously the one that was given to them by the Panthers. So now that finds them again on the clock, having taken Caleb Williams, having added so much talent in the offseason already. Do you think this is a position where they trade out? If not, what position are they looking at here? Let's start there first. What position, if they're sticking and picking, do you think that they go here?
The Chicago Bears, they, 2 top 10 picks. This, I believe this can be a luxury selection for the Chicago Bears, right? And then when I look at their team and I look what they've done this offseason, I'm impressed. But I noticed something. I noticed that Keenan Allen is 32 years old, and he's essentially on a 1-year deal. So what? Let's go ahead and get a receiver to pair with DJ Moore and Caleb Williams for the foreseeable future. So I would have loved Rome right here if he was available for the
Oh
Chicago
yeah.
Bears. That would
Mhm,
have been
mhm.
unfair, but it's pretty close if they can nab a player like Brian Thomas Jr.
Mhm.
Or AD Mitchell. But I had Brian Thomas.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah. So you have him
Mm-hmm.
going receiver here.
I have him
I
going
could see
receiver.
that happening, and you made a very good case for it, right? The
Mm-hmm.
fact that your number one, presumably guy, if you will, in Keenan Allen coming in
Mm-hmm.
is older side. He's had injury problems. He's coming off an amazing year, but
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, very
Mm-hmm.
injured, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they could use a younger guy, and I like the pick of Thomas mainly because to me, he was one of my favorite players in the draft in terms of room to grow. He's
Mm-hmm.
talented now. He will
Mm-hmm.
bring something to the team now. But when I look at his potential, it's super high to me. And I see it as a low ceiling, going to contribute now, high or a low floor, high ceiling
Mm-hmm.
could be that number, top 5 wide receiver in the NFL in a few years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a huge Brian Thomas fan. Obviously, there's been murmurs of him throughout the mock draft season being picked by the Bills.
Mm-hmm.
And the general consensus to me is that if they're going to end up with Brian Thomas Jr., they're going to have to trade up for him. The Bills, I mean. And where would that spot be?
Mm-hmm.
Would the Bills trade up to number 9 to get the likes of a player like a Brian Thomas Jr.? I don't personally think so. I think if Rome Odunze is still there, you can
Mm-hmm.
have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But after hearing, the press conference by Brandon Beane today,
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, there is no way they're trading up and giving up next year's first round pick, because he told the story of how, he's done that before with Carolina and everything. And always the next year, you're thinking to yourself, man, if we had that pick, we would have gotten this guy who was
Mm-hmm.
picked there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think adding the two seconds next year gives him some wiggle room with this one of the second round picks next year to give that up. But he's not going to be willing to give up the first round pick next year. And to
Mm-hmm.
come up here, that's going to be a premium price
Steep
to pay.
price. Steep price.
So that keeping that in mind, in this scenario, the Bills would not get Brian Thomas. The other side of the coin there that I think if I'm the Bears here, where you could be thinking is
Corner.
along that defensive line,
Defense line.
right?
Okay.
And you've got
Ooh.
you've got your pick of the litter here in terms of which is the guy that fits your team the best, right? And you're looking at Newton, and maybe that's the top guy for you. I think Byron Murphy could be a pick here. 9 seems a little bit high, not quite where I've seen them going, but if Chicago sticks and picks, they could get that guy. But could they also trade down 5-6 spots and still end up with one of them? I think so,
Absolutely.
which is why I do think this is a targeted spot by many as like, okay, this is premium trade position, and Chicago could then parlay that extra pick that they got already into even more, right? And they're going to double down on that and get even more guys and more talent in the room for this season. So I think it could benefit both there. But for the purposes of tonight, I like where your head is at. I'm going to go ahead and draft for them Brian Thomas Jr. And again, I think that's a great match for them. He could learn under the likes of a Keenan Allen, start to move toward, becoming that number one guy that I definitely believe he has the potential to be.
Yes.
All right. So coming up at number 10 pick, here it is, the New York Jets, the New Jersey Jets. They're picking here. We all know the Aaron Rodgers situation and all the hype that they continue to get. One of my personal, dissatisfactions last year was the fact that Aaron Rodgers got hurt, because it gave them all a built-in excuse, and I wanted to kick their butts healthy as could be, right? Instead, oh no, we didn't have Rodgers. So
right.
To me, it doesn't matter who they get. Rodgers is not going to be the guy to get them over the hump of the Buffalo Bills. But we'll see coming into this season. There's a lot of hype around this pick for the Jets. They still have some needs. Is this a pick for now or for the future? I think is the question that remains. And given the situation there, the expectation versus the production that they've had, I think this has to be a pick for now. So who's your guy that's going to walk in day one and start producing for you now? And that's a tough thing to say at this spot.
It is.
I know that they have been mocked to get Brock Bowers a lot, right?
Hmm.
That is a
Hmm.
spot here. You see that he's the top player consensus on the PFF big board, and that is somebody that they could end up going with. But I actually think that they're probably more likely to go in the direction of either a tackle or a wide receiver to get Aaron Rodgers either a premium weapon or premium protection at this point in the draft because, again, they had that all invested, all in last season. It didn't work out for them right away. Now it's doubling down and having to pay the piper this season. You disappoint now, everybody's ass is on the line. So,
Right.
what direction are you feeling for the Jets here?
I like where your head is at. I like that. I like that offensive line. I like the tackle position. Right. When you have a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who's in his 40s, coming off an Achilles injury, and you're putting all your cards back in that same deck. You want to make sure that that's protected. You want to make sure that Aaron Rodgers doesn't go through what he went through last year in 4 snaps into the season and it be a season ender. So I want to protect my franchise quarterback for the time being. I'm going to go ahead and get me an offensive lineman to protect my 40-year-old quarterback.
Excellent, excellent move here. If I'm the Jets, this is the move I don't want the Jets to make, right? I might actually be
Right, right.
happier
The
if they
correct
take
one.
the tight end, but I think the
Right.
smart move is to take the tackle and
Hmm.
again, continue to build in the trenches around what you already have and protect Aaron Rodgers. So do you have a preference? I think Fuaga would be a good fit here
Hmm.
for the
Hmm.
Jets.
I think so
So
too. I think so too.
all right, we'll go ahead and put that
Forget
pick in
Fuara.
then.
Hmm.
And, again, you're talking about a guy who's going to come in and be in every snap starter for them on day one, right? And that's going to be huge in
Hmm.
terms of, finding that chemistry moving forward for the quarterback that you're hoping can carry you to the promised land. So all of that's our top 10 picks so far. And I think the biggest shocker is that we have 3 quarterbacks that probably expected, but 4 wide receivers in the top 10, given
Hmm.
how it worked out. Again, no trades, so nobody's trading up to get that next quarterback.
Hmm.
However, that leaves Minnesota sitting here at 11 with their mouth watering saying, we get our guy, right? We went out, we got an extra pick in this draft, likely to have the draft capital to go
Hmm.
up to get a quarterback when we felt it was necessary.
Hmm.
However, this board fell very nicely for them in effect where, okay, you've got your pick of the little litter here at 11. If quarterback is the direction you want to go, I
Hmm.
think that JJ McCarthy is the guy that Minnesota has had their eye on. And if somebody is likely to jump over them and end up taking JJ McCarthy, they could also go Bo Nix here, and it wouldn't surprise me. Say that 3 weeks ago and people would have thought you're crazy. Bo Nix isn't a first rounder, but
Hmm.
now they've come around to, okay, it's a quarterback premium position. This is a good quarterback draft. I
Hmm.
think Bo Nix could go in the first round. However, here I think the best fit is JJ McCarthy, and Minnesota gets exactly what they were hoping for without technically in our draft giving up both of those picks to make it happen. So,
Yeah.
any objections to the quarterback here, or anything to say about the fit of JJ McCarthy in that offense, throwing to Jefferson and Addison and making it work there in Minnesota?
Uh, not at all. Not at all. I think that the Minnesota Vikings definitely regressed a bit. You know, they have big losses: Kirk Cousins, Daniel Hunter, KJ Osborne, Jordan Hicks. So they lost some significant pieces. But when you have a guy like Justin Jefferson, who is arguably the best receiver in the NFL, and
Mhm.
he has a contract coming up, and now he's at a point where he's looking at the organization sideways, like, okay, you know, my contract is coming up. What are you going to do to ensure that I'm going to be with this organization and it's going to be a winning one? So I think Justin Jefferson has his eyes and looking at the GM and the organization in that retrospect. So because of that, you want to be able to pair your receiver with a quarterback that you think can be the guy for the foreseeable future. And we've seen the reports of the Minnesota Vikings really taking a liking to JJ McCarthy. And if they feel that they can open up the tools that he probably didn't open up because he was in the Jim Harbaugh system,
Mm-hmm.
then they definitely need to
Yes.
go ahead and pull that trigger. So I agree, JJ McCarthy's the guy for the Minnesota Vikings.
Excellent pick there for Minnesota. Again, a prime team that has already acquired the ammunition to potentially use the 2 picks that they have in this first round to move up to get the quarterback that they have their eye on. My thought is that is JJ McCarthy, knowing that those top 3 are likely to be gone already. And maybe they're fooling and it could be Bo Nix. But that brings us to this Broncos pick, which is probably the team that is also looking or needs a quarterback. We know that for sure, but are they looking at quarterback here? And given that McCarthy just went, is this too high to pick Bo Nix? I think so, but is Bo Nix the right quarterback for the Broncos system and what Peyton is trying to do there? That could be a match made in heaven. And when you're talking about a quarterback with a strong arm and who has a proven track record, that tends to transition well to, early starting in the NFL. So I think that, given his track record, given his power arm, I think Bo Nix could be the pick here. But if not, let's go back to the big board and see overall. Again, you still have Brock Bowers as up there. You've got defensive players like Cooper DeJean and Mitchell as cornerbacks. Edge. I just think that if you're the Broncos here, again, we talked about it at the number 3 pick with New England. Quarterback is the premium position, and you don't have one. So you need to go out and find a guy who you think could lead your team. The question is, does that match up for Bo Nix in this spot for the Broncos? So what are you thinking if you're the Broncos here?
I think they're in a tough spot.
Yeah.
I think they're in a real tough spot. I like Bo Nix. I think he's a bit of a reach at 12. I think he's a tad bit of a reach at 12. But again, if you have your scouts, you have your regional and your area scouts, your GM, your head coach. If you feel like this guy is the guy, then you need to go get your guy. And like you said, quarterback is a premium position, and they don't have one. They taken a $53 million dead cap hit by getting rid of Russell Wilson, right? So I think Bo Nix can definitely be the guy here at 12, even though it may be perceived as a reach. I think he has some tools and some capabilities that Sean Payton does like and he can work with. And I believe that he's a guy that will struggle in his first year. I don't know how much weapons they have on the outsides and running the ball, but it can definitely be a learning year for Bo Nix, being under an offensive guru, so to speak, in Sean Payton, and he can develop his skills, and hopefully he can be that guy that can turn into a franchise quarterback in year 2 with more weapons. So I'm gonna go ahead and agree with you there and stamp on Bo Nix.
Yeah, we're not doing trades in this draft as a reminder, but I think this is the first one where you're like, the Broncos are going to be calling other teams and saying, hey, you want to come up to 12 because we didn't get the guy we wanted in to be on the board in JJ McCarthy. And now we're in a position where we could get more talent and still get the next guy who is the best match for us in Bo Nix. But for the sake of this draft, we'll go ahead and pick Bo Nix here. I think it is a good match for the Broncos. I agree that it's too high, but you got with quarterback, we know that's what you got to do. You got to pick when you have the chance. And there are teams that could jump you. And speaking of, you've got the Raiders here with the next pick right behind you, which I think does add pressure to the Broncos to say, look, if you're going to trade down, that doesn't mean you're going to get your guy, because the Raiders still need a quarterback as well. However, this board, I think, has fallen really well for the Raiders as well as we have it right now. Even if, the Broncos are able to trade out, the Raiders are going to have their pick of the litter here for needs. You see their quarterback is a need, but also offensive line, defensive interior, cornerback. They all have premium players on the board still here. I think, the one guy that I'm like, how is he still here? They're going to take him is Byron Murphy for me. But, I could see other fits as well. Could they go cornerback? Sure, maybe. Could they go offensive line? Yes, absolutely. That's a need. And again, we can't stress enough the depth of the offensive line in this draft. Although lately, it seems like overall, even on, the big networks and everything, you're hearing people say, well, it's a deep draft for tackles, so everybody feels like they can get one in the second round, and they're
Mhm.
not picking them in the first round where, these top level talents are, because is there a big difference between the second, third guy on the board and the 10th, 11th guy on the board? So,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, that being said, I think that's why I would pick defensive, line here, but I'm I'm open to suggestions. So tell me what you think is the best fit for the Raiders given how this board fell.
Oh man, another team in a tough spot. They signed Gardner Minshew. They got Aiden O'Connell. So I think they're going to pass some quarterback here. There's
Mhm.
quarterbacks off the board.
Mhm.
I think the tiers has dropped to a point where it's like, okay, we're not going to do an extended reach here on a quarterback,
Yes.
right? So
Mhm.
I like the defensive line. I like defensive line, but I was thinking offensive line. I was thinking offensive tackle as well for the Raiders. Antonio Pierce, head coach, he looked like he was when he took over. He started really building identity in the run game, running Josh Jacobs and playing that smash mouth football. And in order to play that smash mouth football, you got to have an offensive line that is physical in the
Mhm.
trenches to do so. So I believe that it could be Troy from Washington, or it could be Fashanu from Penn State. So either one would do the trick on
Yeah.
the offensive line.
And that is what I was thinking too. Premium positions when you're
Mm,
talking offense, obviously quarterback is one, but
mhm,
offensive line, especially tackle, is right up there with that. And it gets
mhm,
drafted early and often, right?
mhm, mhm.
And I do think that Olu Fashanu could be a great
Fashanu.
match here for them. So I think that's going to be who I stick
Nice.
and pick for the Raiders at this spot. Again, pick of the litter for them.
Mhm.
I think they are extremely excited to get a guy like that on draft night.
Definitely.
And kind of, have that cornerstone for them moving forward. So easy, good pick there for them. Now that brings us to the New Orleans Saints, pick 14. You see the needs there: quarterback, wide receiver, tackle, defensive line. Obviously, quarterback not in this position likely.
Mhm,
Wide receiver, we've heard the same things about wide receiver that we just talked about offensive line. This
mhm,
class is deep. There's a lot of shuffling going on. Some people have these five guys you see here: A.D. Mitchell, Troy Franklin, McConkey,
mm,
Coleman. I've
mhm,
seen, Leggett in the first round. Lots of movement around these guys in terms of where they go from basically here onto the middle of the second round, right?
mhm,
So
mhm,
so it could be a wide receiver here. Tackle, we just talked about the fact that some of the premium tackle talent is still on the board here. That New Orleans offensive line desperately needs some help.
mhm,
So, but again, the other position of need that is listed there is defensive line. And we just
mhm,
stated who's still on the board here, there. So if I'm some of these teams in the middle here, my mouth is watering as the pick gets closer to me because the board is falling just as you want it. But I have a feeling that it's going to be the best tackle available that ends up going to the Saints. Do you think that there is a chance of it being another position? Do you have inclination one way or another here for the
I,
Saints?
you know what? I like it a lot. I was thinking either defensive line or offensive line, right? Do you want to go with the fourth best tackle, or do you want to go with possibly the best defensive tackle in Jair Newton? So that's the debate that the Las Vegas Raiders organization, I
Hmm.
think they're going to be going. Excuse me, New Orleans Saints organization is going to be going back and forth on. But when I saw Derek Carr last year, he was nicked up a lot. He got nicked up a lot. I don't think they got the run support necessary to be successful, even though they won 9 games. It wasn't an impressive non-victory. So I would go the direction of tackle as well. I would go ahead and get the kid from Washington.
All righty, that's the pick we're going to make here. So another tackle off the board. We're talking about this draft being a premium tackle draft, and now you're seeing it come, right? Here's the
Mm-hmm,
run
mm-hmm,
on the tackle position.
mm-hmm,
Moving right into now pick 15 on the clock, the Indianapolis Colts. PFF has their biggest needs as wide receiver and defensive back. And they now, again, come into this with their choice of the top wide receivers available, or in my mind, probably, we have not yet taken a cornerback. Here it is, 15 picks into the draft, and
Mhm.
we have not picked a cornerback. That is, unusual in the NFL draft, to say the least, because on
Right.
defense,
Right.
cornerback is one of those premium positions. I think they have to go cornerback here. If I had to pick one that's currently on the board, I would probably go Mitchell to the Colts. Maybe Terrion Arnold. Do you have leaning inkling one way or the other here, or do you feel like they would potentially go wide receiver or somewhere else in the draft? If we look at the top available still, Brock Bowers is still on the board. Cooper DeJean is listed, but I don't think, at least I don't have him that high, as I still have Mitchell over him. You still have Edge, Leitu Latu, Jazeer Newton. I mean, it's their pick of the litter,
Of the litter,
truly,
literally.
at the
I
Colts here.
and here's the thing, right? I would go corner here. I'm thinking Mitchell. I like Mitchell. I like his skill set. I like his size. You pair him up with Kenny Moore in the slot. They re-sign Julian Blackman, so that secondary will be rounded into form with a guy like Mitchell. I really like. But I'm also looking at Brock Bowers. He's intriguing right here at 15, right? We got you re-sign Michael Pittman, that 3-year, $70 million contract. But now you have to think about, okay, I got, a young quarterback in Anthony Richardson, right? And he's a guy, he got hurt last year. So he got hurt halfway into his rookie season. So technically this year, he'll still be into his rookie season, even though he's in his second year as a pro. And you want that security blanket. You want that guy that can be open and you could feed the ball to in those soft coverage zones and those soft spots. So I really like Brock Bowers here as well. So it's tough. It's tough, Anthony. This one
I
is
like
tough.
it.
So I'm gonna give the floor is yours.
You know what?
Whatever you want to do here.
That is it. The way this board has fallen, I have not picked in my mock drafts that I've done Brock Bowers going to the Colts, but I could see that happening. So you know what? We're going to go ahead and do it, because the fact that he's fallen this far is kind of shocking. And if somebody doesn't trade up to get him, I agree with you that when you're talking about, just because the need says wide receiver there for the Colts, it's a pass catcher, it's a playmaker, and there's no doubt that Brock Bowers can be that guy. And if the Colts, like you said, with their young quarterback, he could fill that need for them. Definitely. And the fact that he is most likely to be at the top of their board, unless we, at the wide receiver position, you're talking A.D. Mitchell, Ladd McConkey, some of these guys that we've seen going down toward the end of round 1, beginning of round 2 in a lot of mock drafts. That doesn't mean that's where these players are going to go in the actual draft, but and who knows, they could end up picking their favorite wide receiver there. But I absolutely love it. Why not? Let's do it. Brock Bowers to the Colts. That brings us to pick number 16, and a team that always baffles me in the draft, it seems like, is the Seattle Seahawks, whose needs are listed at guard, center, edge, linebacker, safety. So for sure they're taking running back, right? That's where they're going to go. They've got 2-star running backs. They're going to pick a third, right?
That's funny. That's funny. And you would think so. You would think so, knowing their history. But I tell you what, I like. Now, of course, we have to see if the guy can be a head coach. There's a difference between being a good defensive coordinator and being a good head coach. But I like the hiring of Mike McDonald. So I'm definitely interested to see the direction that the Seattle Seahawks go here. I'm thinking they're going to build in the trenches. I'm thinking they may go offensive line. Let's see. Can we see the?
You want interior, or so Jackson Powers Johnson, probably still too early for him. Tackles, you still got Latham on the board, who is another one of them. These guys, all of the tackles, really would not surprise me if the order gets shuffled up beyond Alt. Right, Alt is the consensus number 1, but I think the next 4 or 5 guys, it would not surprise me if any of them go. So if you're picking tackle here, that could be it there. But we've also got the interior offensive lineman pulled up as well. Guard, I think, I
think that's definitely a need. Guard is definitely a need for the Seattle Seahawks.
And I could see them being a team that is like, you know what, this is our need. Again, they always surprise me in the draft. So you're talking interior offensive lineman. could it be? Could this be where Cooper Beebe gets the pick, right? I've seen him moving up mock drafts. I've seen him, McCormick as well, one of those guys in a deep offensive line draft. It's a matter of what team sees them as a fit for their system and the guy to come in day one and get those snaps. However, what do you think here? Because I think that if I'm the Seahawks, I'm probably going, cornerback and not looking back really. But if
it's tough,
given how this board fell overall, however, I think that the needs might outweigh that here, and they're always a wild card. So if we're gonna pick guard, let's pick a guard who's not a consensus one here. If that's the direction you want to go, you want to go with a Christian Hines or
we can go with Christian Hines. We can go with Christian Hines.
All right, he's the top according to PFF.
Right.
You see his overall number is 60. This would be a higher reach for them.
Right.
But again, this is very, very Seahawksy move in my mind.
That's right.
Seahawksy move. So I'll take it. Even though there's a new coach there, it's still, they're always unpredictable. Okay, now pick 17. I think this makes a little more sense here. We still have not had a cornerback come off the board, and the Jacksonville Jaguars, their biggest need in my mind is cornerback. So I think this is like a stick and pick situation. I think Quinyon Mitchell is the pick here, given how this board fell. If he was not on the board, I'd probably be inclined to not go the route of Cooper DeJean, who's seen more as like a safety corner hybrid, but a Terrion Arnold could be the guy there, or a Nate Wiggins. Both of those guys could be fits if, again, cornerbacks have gone ahead. But, I mean, to me,
I like Mitchell.
Unless you object, Mitchell has to be the best pick of those, right?
Yeah, I like Mitchell. I like Mitchell a lot.
And again, Jacksonville, happy as a clam that this draft worked out exactly how they were hoping, and they got what in their minds is the best cornerback in this draft. Here's one that I've seen bounce around a little bit. At pick 18 on the clock now, the Cincinnati Bengals, their needs are listed as tight end, tackle, defensive interior. But there's been a lot of talk around, wide receiver could become a need for them if T. Higgins ends up going somewhere else, getting traded, or if they pick a wide receiver here and then trade him, right? We've seen that happen in the draft over the last few years. Is there a guy, on this list who you think, the wide receiver list, who you think the Bengals could target, or are you more inclined to go tackle? Or again, my pick here would probably be defensive line, just because those top guys are screaming at you that they're still on the board. Let's start with wide receiver. If you think they were going to go wide receiver, do you think it would be the A.D. Mitchell, or are they going for, somebody like a Ladd McConkey, who's more of a, route running, pass catching guy?
I think if they were to go the route of the receiver, I think Mitchell could be the guy. Just having that size complement that they see with T. Higgins, even though I don't think A.D. Mitchell is as physical, he's more of a finesse, big player. I think that it's still attractive to the Cincinnati Bengals being able to possibly pair him with a Jamar Chase. So if they was to go that route in the offensive weapons, I'm thinking A.D. Mitchell. But I like your sentiments earlier, man. I that defensive line, the defensive interior, it's been overlooked thus far through the first 17 picks.
Yeah.
And when I'm looking at the Cincinnati Bengals, they lost DJ Reader on the inside. So when Sheldon Rankins, they signed him for a replacement, but in my opinion, he's a downgrade over DJ Reader. So if you have an opportunity to take possibly the best interior defensive lineman in the draft at pick 18, at this point, the consensus might look at it as a steal.
Yes.
Right. So I'm thinking I'll go ahead and get a Newton or Byron Murphy at this point here for the Cincinnati Bengals.
Okay. I'm honestly inclined to go Murphy over Newton. That's just me. But I'm gonna go ahead and make that pick there. I think that's a beautiful pick for Cincinnati, even if one or the other is off the board, that they're going to be, again, they've satisfied a huge need for their team. They can figure out wide receiver in this deep draft later if they need to, if they even end up moving around on from Higgins.
Mhm.
But that's a great pick for them, which brings me to pick 19. This team with an LA and a horn that we have never seen pick in the first round. I
Right.
don't know what
Who
their
is
team
that?
name is.
Right.
The Rams picking in the first round. What year is it?
Wha-
1999? I mean, come on. They haven't had a pick in the first round and it's in absolutely forever. But here they are on the board. I'd say this is a team that exceeded expectations last year. They have one of the best coaches in the league by far. And here they are in a position to pick. Their needs listed: quarterback, man, we'll see about that. Tackle, defensive line, linebacker, and cornerback. Again, the defensive line, you lose the absolute star player in Aaron Donald. And I think that
Mm,
immediately screams,
mm,
we have that position to fill.
mm,
And even though you could
mm.
fill in guys elsewhere, tackle obviously still a need for them. I think that's the direction they go. And again, if we're looking at the big board here, Cooper DeJean is there, Latu Latu, but we've talked about his medical concern. Newton is sitting right there for them. I think that could be the pick. If Murphy's gone ahead of them, they could be the ones picking Newton. Uh, uh, you've got the cornerbacks who are still there as well. And Terry and Arnold.
Mhm.
I mean, again,
Pick of the litter.
your pick of the litter, but it's got to be defense in my mind here
Mhm.
over the tackle position.
I agree.
Uh, I think I would tend to go Newton, but I don't know. What do you think here?
I
Would you?
so I would go Newton, right? But I always think from both sides of the spectrum. Trey White, they signed him to a pretty lucrative deal
For 1 year,
based
yeah.
for 1 year based off his injury history. Is it do you possibly need insurance for Trey White?
Mm.
There's Cooper Dijon there, and Trey White is more of a stopgap player as opposed to a core player for their organization. So he can be an interesting pick as well. So I definitely think defense, but it is either Cooper or Newton. And again, I said what I said, but I'm still leaning towards Newton. You want to replace a guy like Aaron Donald. I don't believe they've done so yet. At least they attempted to fortify the cornerback position with the
Right.
Trey White acquisition. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna go Newton.
I like it. Again, I think I would think it's between Terry and Arnold and Newton, but I think
Mhm.
that I'm going to go ahead and make that pick Newton for this one. The Rams get a great guy. Again, I'm
Mhm.
excited for all these teams, man. The draft is so fun because you study these players and you get
Mhm.
excited for where they go. Even though we're Bills fans, we could get excited for the Rams for making that pick, right?
Right.
So, you could see possibly, with Latu falling here, he's a UCLA guy. Could they pick their local guy? But we didn't even discuss the edge position. With Latu still on the board, I just think it's the medicals that end up making him fall a little further than this pick at this point in our mock draft. So at pick 20, we've got on the clock the Pittsburgh Steelers. We know, right? One of their glaring needs is wide receiver. They've been in talks with every team who seems to have that wide receiver for trade available. But also listed here, tackle, center, which we already talked about. There
Mhm.
are some centers on the board here, and cornerback. Again, to me, the one screaming out, even though PFF has Cooper DeJean listed higher, I think Terry and Arnold is, just a good pick here for the Steelers if they don't go wide receiver, assuming they are going to end up trading for pick your wide receiver who's available.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think that Terry and Arnold to me would be who I picked here. What do you think?
I Oh man, and I would agree. And again, it's tough. So if I'm going to go on a stance that on draft night the Pittsburgh Steelers is going to somehow find a way to acquire a Brandon Ayuk, that would eliminate the wide receiver position as an immediate need, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore I would definitely go Terry and Arnold here. So I like the pick, but wide receiver is still in my mind. But I'm gonna go ahead and agree with you here. I like the Arnold pick. If I was to go wide receiver, then AD Mitchell would be a guy that I would look
Yeah.
at. But
Oh,
but I like the Arnold pick.
AD Mitchell could be the guy there, but we're talking about a defensive team that needs their defensive guys. That's why I think I'm going to go Terry and Arnold here. That I think it's a good matchup, good fit for them with the Steelers. So we'll see where they go with that position. If they don't end up trading for a wide receiver, I do think that could be on the board there, and AD Mitchell falling to them could be the pick as well. But that moves us to another AFC East rival here. The Miami Dolphins, needs listed as tight end, offensive line, and defensive line. I just absolutely believe that the pick here is going to be interior offensive line. And there you have it right at the top. Jackson Powers Johnson just available right there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he could be the pick here for Miami. Tight end, I don't think is an option at this point in this draft. If you're talking about interior defensive linemen, we do still have some on the board, but remember we picked those two guys earlier. So now you're falling a little deeper than I think could be favorable for the overall board. Again, when
Mm-hmm.
you're looking here, um, could they pick a guy given how this board has fallen, an edge player like a Dallas Turner or a Latu,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, right? Given how this board has fallen, I could
Mm-hmm.
see it being one of those guys. But I just believe that, again, thinking about where they're at, interior offensive lineman is such a need for them that I would like the Jackson Powers Johnson pick here. So which way are you leaning? Would you go more toward the board, the lineman, or do you think there's another surprise pick here?
I have to agree and go Jackson Powers here. Of course, edge would be an interesting position to attack with, your edge
Question marks
rushers.
and yeah, health,
Yeah,
right? They've got a few
mm-hmm.
guys injured.
With Phillips and Chubb. So that's
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely a question there. But I'm thinking about Tua. I'm thinking about the Miami Dolphins wanting to give him as much protection as possible. I'm thinking about the offense wanting to create those running lanes for those speedy guys. And I think Jackson Powers Johnson is a guy that you can put on your interior for the next decade. I really like him as an offensive line prospect. And I would hate to see him go to Miami, but I think it'll be the smart selection.
Yep. So there we go. We'll make that our official pick. Jackson Powers Johnson goes to Miami, and they have solidified their offensive line. That moves us to on the clock. The Philadelphia Eagles at 22. Needs listed are a wide receiver, linebacker, and I think the big one here, defensive back. To me, is probably the direction they go. Wide receiver, they have a lot invested in the wide receiver position at this point. And although there is some, appeal to be had there with the guys available, like many, we saw those top four go in the top 10, and it's been like, do we really want to pick that over some of this other talent that isn't as deep in this draft and can be the value of picking this guy now versus waiting is higher, right? So you're seeing these top wide receivers fall a little bit, but it's because there's other talent and needs there. So even though there's still good wide receivers available, I think this could be another defensive back spot. Specifically, Cooper DeJean would be a good fit there, I think. And the next DB on the board, if we go to the DB picks here, Nate Wiggins, I think that could be a great pick for them as well.
Mhm.
I think Kool-Aid McKinstry, a little bit too early for him in my mind, but yeah, what are you feeling here? You think they go cornerback or do they lean into wide receiver, blow up that offense? What do you think?
Uh, I like Nate Wiggins here. I like the way he runs. His fluid. He's very fluid. I just think, of course, he has to fill out a little bit. He has to get a little bit stronger, but his movement skills and ability is something that's going to be very attractive. I really like that pick for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when you're talking about their needs and their fit, I
Hmm.
think Wiggins coming there, that's going to be somebody who was higher on their draft board than where they're picking. And whenever that happens, you feel like you've got the win. So great match there for them.
Hmm.
Now on the clock, we've got this number 23 pick, the Minnesota Vikings. Again, looks like they're trying to package these two top picks to move
Hmm.
up and get their quarterback. But should they
Hmm.
end up sticking and picking here, that's what we're going to go off. Again, remember, we gave them J.J. McCarthy with their first pick.
Hmm.
Now in this 20 at pick 23, other needs listed: tight end, guard, center, defensive interior, and defensive back again. Um,
Hmm.
which position are you feeling for leaning in? Again, looking at our big board, according to PFF rankings here, Um, Cooper DeJean is there. Leitu Latu still. Dallas Turner, edge, right? Latham, the tackle.
Hmm.
There are guys to be had here. Mims, tackle.
Hmm.
And then we're getting into the wide receivers as well. Kool-Aid McKinstry still on the board.
Hmm.
Cornerback is a need for them. So, I mean, which direction are you feeling for the Minnesota Vikings, assuming they make this pick here?
At this point for the Minnesota Vikings, I just want a good football player. I want the best player available. We have a bunch of holes. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we definitely regressed, and we're just trying at this point. We just want to accumulate talent. So let's use the best player available approach for the Minnesota Vikings, and I wouldn't be opposed to any one of those three: Cooper LeJean, Latu, or Dallas Turner.
Yeah, and I thinking about these top three, although Cooper DeJean is listed as the top. To me, I'd probably think that they would go Dallas Turner here,
Hmm.
filling that edge position.
Hmm.
To
They
me,
lost Hunter.
so we'll go that way.
Hmm.
And wow, if you're the Minnesota Vikings and you end up with McCarthy as your quarterback, and you still have this pick to fill with a top edge player, man, you look like one of the teams that's made out in this draft for sure. So they get Turner there. That puts the Dallas Cowboys on the clock. Their needs all over the place here. Wide receiver, running back, I don't think is going to go in the first round. Tackle, center, defensive interior, cornerback. They need players. Is this a situation where you could see, again, best player on the board? Do they go a Cooper DeJean? Will they take a Leitu Latu? Do they continue to build their offensive line that they're known for, really hitting on their picks there? I think that's the direction I would go. Latham falling this far to me is an absolute steal for Dallas. But they could go one of the others there. What do you think?
Tyron Smith was a staple offensive lineman for the Dallas Cowboys for what, a decade.
Mm-hmm.
They got rid of him because he's too expensive. He's older and he's now have some injury history. I think when you see a guy like J.C. Latham, you're automatically looking at like, okay, this could be the next tackle we have to replace a Tyron Smith for another 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think, when he's sitting out there like a sore thumb to me. I'm going JC.
Yeah, I really like that pick there. I agree. I think that Dallas, knowing they have to replace a player who was so iconic for them, that just fell on their plate very nicely as well. Another team is going to be happy coming away with a player that fits their needs. So now we move to pick 25, the Green Bay Packers. They need offensive line as well. They need defensive interior. They need safety. I think this is a spot that everybody is screaming Cooper DeJean in my mind. But do you see another fit that could fill a hole for them there at this pick?
Oh, again, yep, they can easily go, offensive line there. But I'm at a point right now where it's like, okay, Green Bay Packers, they definitely can use some secondary help. They lost Jonathan Owens, they lost Darnell Savage, even though they're safeties. I definitely think they could use that type of help. And even though he's listed as a corner, Cooper DeJean, he's uh, a versatile player, and he can play corner, and then he can play the safety position as well. So if the Green Bay Packers are looking for interchangeable players, especially with some guys that they lost, Cooper DeJean seemed like a great fit out there in Green Bay.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and make him the pick there because you and I agree that seems to be a
Mhm.
very good fit for them. That cornerback safety role that he can play. Talented players still on the clock there. One that I have seen mocked to the Bills in round one comes a few picks before them. It's now time for us to start thinking about that, right? As we get closer to pick 28 here, we're at pick 26. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are on the clock. Their needs listed tight end again, guard, center, edge, linebacker, cornerback. Edge with Leitu Latu have coming down here. I think this is now a spot where I could see him coming off the board. That's the one that screams to me. I mean, they could go with a guard or a center. Again, one of those players that we talked about earlier, if we go to the interior offensive line, even though PFF might have them ranked lower, I could see this being, BB, McCormick, Frazier. Those guys are all in play here, depending on how Tampa Bay feels about them. But just looking at the overall map, yes, Latu has medicals that have made him fall, but I think that would be the pick given how this board has come. However, a guy like Kool-Aid McKinstry could be in play here as well at the cornerback position. How are you feeling about things given this board and what it's worked out for Tampa Bay?
I'm running up to the podium to select Latu from UCLA. If his medicals check out, there's going to be a lot of upset organizations that passed on him and let him drop down to 22, 23. So I like Latu 26, excuse me. So I like Latu for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the edge there. I think that's an excellent fit.
All right, so we'll make him the official pick there. And now we're one pick away, ladies and gentlemen, from the Bills. Number 27 is the Arizona Cardinals. Their needs are listed as wide receiver. Again, in the early pick in the draft there, they got the guy in the draft, right? The Marvin Harrison Jr. Guard, center, defensive line, cornerback, all good positions in this draft. Where do you think, what direction you think they go at this pick, one away from the Bills? So now let's start talking big board, right? When we look at all, you've got a few tackles there in Graham Barton and Amarius Mims. A.D. Mitchell is the name for wide receiver. Again, these PFF rankings here. Kool-Aid McKinstry still on the board. They have Troy Franklin listed here. Tyler Nubin, a safety. Could he make it into the first round? I think not, but who knows at this point. So if you're the Arizona Cardinals here, where do you think they end up going?
It gets tough at this point, right? But when I look at the board right now, I'm looking at their needs. I'm taking the Alabama kid, Kool-Aid McKinstry.
I like that pick. I think that could be. I'm going to go ahead and make that the pick because I do think it makes sense, given the situation and that team, and again, a high position in cornerback. This is right around where I think he could go. And that leaves our Buffalo Bills, ladies and gentlemen, are on the clock at pick 28. And I got to tell you, I don't know how I feel about this because obviously there's no other position to start with than wide receiver. PFF has our other needs as tackle, defensive interior, and defensive back. But you look at this wide receiver board and you basically have the second tier pick of your litter, right? I drew the line at Brian Thomas Jr. I think the Bills will have to trade up in order to get him, but I'm not putting a super high value trade up. I'm not getting into the top 10 for a guy like that, maybe for a Dunze, but I don't see that happening now either, based on Brandon Beane's comments earlier today, talking about how he doesn't want to have to give up the first round pick next year and the guys they could get with those first round picks. So, wide receiver, A.D. Mitchell, Troy Franklin, Ladd McConkey, Keon Coleman. I mean, I've given my opinion on some of these guys throughout the lead up to this draft. I do not think the Bills are a fit for A.D. Mitchell. I think that his attitude is something to be concerned about. The fact that they have to question his on-field capabilities. Now, trust me, the Bills have done their homework. They've met with him. They may say that, you know what, we don't see that as a problem. But not being on the inside, looking from the outside, that is why I don't tend to lean toward A.D. Mitchell to the Bills. Troy Franklin, one of the guys I've loved and had mocked early to the Bills at this position. I would not be mad if they picked him here, but I feel like you could get him, that same guy, in the second round. So if I'm the Bills here, to me, this is screaming trade back. This is screaming, please, dear God, somebody give us something to come up here, right? And on that note, I think one of the big pros to the Bills thinking about trading back here, not only just how this board has fallen in this situation, but in general, is the fact that we do not have a third round pick. And you know that Beane and McDermott, they bank on that second and third round being, where you see a lot of talent coming off the board. And I think they would love to get a third round pick from somebody. And this is the way to do that, right? You could trade down, get into the early second round, pick up a 3rd round pick, maybe have to give them up another one of our 5th or 6th round picks to make it work, whatever it takes. But you get a 5th, you get their 2nd, and you have your 2nd. Man, to me, is that ideal case scenario. The problem with that is now you need to have somebody on the board that people are clamoring to trade up for. And the way this board has fallen, I don't know who that player is. And if it's a wide receiver, is it a guy that the Bills are willing to pass on in an A.D. Mitchell or a Ladd McConkey? Because to me, if it's stick and pick at wide receiver, obviously, I think I would want to go Ladd McConkey here. Because after giving up Stephon Diggs, you need a guy who can run routes, be a reliable pass catcher. I think McConkey can do those types of things. And, again, Troy Franklin, I'd love to have him. If he were the pick, I would not be mad. A.D. Mitchell, although he's talented, I have questions on. Keon Coleman, another guy that I have, just the fact that he's a polarizing figure means to me that I don't want to pick that guy because I'm afraid of what he could end up being. So the floor is too low for me. Trading back is not always a thing of beauty. You can't just say we want to trade back and make it happen.
Right.
Is there a tackle here, again, on this big board here, Mims and Barton, that somebody would want to come up and get? Again, I'm not so certain, right? So although me at the Bills pick here is calling everybody saying, come on up and get your guy, the board is telling me that you're going to have to stick and pick. So you're going to use every second. And if it's me, I'm taking Ladd McConkey. But because this is the Bills pick, I will now give you the floor to explain what you think you would do or what you think the Bills would do in this situation.
I like our chemistry, Anthony.
We're on the same page, huh?
Yeah, it's a great start, great show, and is a great build up for next week's actual draft special. But like you said, as people love the skill set of A.D. Mitchell, and I could see it, right? Big, tall kid, was tall receiver, fluid mover, can exercise all 3 positions, short, intermediate, and long. But again, Buffalo, Sean McDermott is big on culture, big on fits, and I'm not sure if A.D. Mitchell is that fit for the Buffalo Bills culture, especially when we had to go through Stephon Diggs, right? It wasn't a lot of skirmish and it wasn't a lot of beef between the Bills and Stephon Diggs. Maybe not like the Minnesota Vikings, but they did have their struggles between organization and receiver. And I think A.D. Mitchell can present those same type of problems. And we don't even know if he can be productive to even warrant the type of problems he can bring to the table. So I love Ladd McConkey as well. I think, you can line them up anywhere, X, Y, Z, it doesn't matter. And I really like what Brandon Beane said. He said in his press conference that they don't necessarily need a number 1 receiver. They just need receivers that perform well in their skill set. And I think when you look at a Ladd McConkey and you think about what Joe Brady's trying to implement on offense in terms of short and intermediate, get guys in space and let guys work those soft coverage zones, I think Ladd McConkey can be that guy and that can work the short and intermediate routes. I believe he can be that guy that can be an X receiver because he has those comparisons to a Garrett Wilson of the New York Jets, and he can work the slot as well. So I think when you're drafting a guy like Ladd McConkey and thinking about all the things he can do well, along with the versatility of a Curtis Samuel and a Khalil Shakir, I believe the Buffalo Bills can now play positionless football with their wide receivers. And I think Ladd McConkey and what he's able to bring to the table would be an excellent fit for the Buffalo Bills. So if we was to stick and pick, he would be my guy. He's the safest pick, in my opinion, for the Buffalo Bills at 28 for the wide receiver position.
Yeah, so I mean, we are on the same page there, right? We both feel the same way. I don't think it's a reach to take McConkey here. Ideally, you trade down a few and get him early in the 2nd round. But again, looking at this board, is there anybody you see that you think immediately maybe a team is going to try and trade up for and get? I mean, maybe an AD Mitchell. We know
Maybe.
that the talk with AD Mitchell, he has a high ceiling, right? Some people
Hmm.
think he can be an elite wide receiver one in this league. He has all those traits and characteristics that people like. But with the question marks and the, intensity, again, it's not a culture fit for the Bills, I think. So
Hmm.
if somebody were to trade up to get AD Mitchell, I wouldn't be mad there. Now,
Hmm.
it might put egg on our face in the future if he does become a superstar number one. But
Hmm.
either way, I still don't think he's the right fit for the Bills in terms of the
Hmm.
culture. So
Hmm.
I wouldn't be mad if they were somebody traded up and wanted AD Mitchell here. But in terms
Um,
of the tackles or linebacker, or I mean, I just don't.
maybe
Maybe
Mims.
offensive line. Yeah.
Maybe Mims. Maybe he has. So the concerning thing about Amarius Mims is his injury history, right? He
Yes.
does get injury, but when he was healthy, he was a pretty good, pretty damn good tackle for the Georgia Bulldogs. So if there's a team out there that's desperate for tackle and looked at the tape of Mims and say, you know what, if we can keep this guy healthy, he could be a cornerstone piece for our offensive line. I can see him, big physical guy on the outside, possibly getting selected on the trade up. But other than that, I don't see much. I don't see much. Him and
Yeah,
Mitchell.
that is the concern. And I also have my scream into the void pick here,
Hmm.
which if we're live and this happens, let me tell you, my head might explode.
Hmm.
Safety, right? Tyler Nubin's on the board. There's other picks here that
Hmm.
could be, but if the Bills go a position like safety or even like cornerback, given who's left in this situation, um, I think my head might literally explode on
Hmm.
air when we're live next week because
Hmm.
I mean, I would not understand why and how that could be your best pick for this team in this moment. You
Right.
can say that safety's a need, but we know that Sean McDermott and Brandon Bean, they can make safeties out of nothing, right? I could be a star safety for them because they're that talented at doing it, right? So I just don't. I would absolutely hate that. Although I'm not. It's not the player.
It's
I'm
not the
not
player.
hating
It's not
on
the
Newman.
player.
It's
Right.
it's the position you're in, the need value, and and what else you could get there. And
So let me ask you this. Let me ask you this right quick,
Mhm,
Anthony.
mhm.
Xavier Leggett is a polarizing figure.
Yes.
Is it does he tickle your fancy as a player that's possibly he's not high. You see him up there at
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
53, but is he a player that tickles your fancy as possible? Like, hey, this can be the surprise pick for the Buffalo Bills at number 28, Xavier Leggett.
100%. I do believe that he's in play and he's been moving up boards. This is a guy who, when he went to the Senior Bowl, he really impressed people there. And I saw him give an interview on NFL Network. And in that interview, the first thing I said is, "Oh my God, the Bills are going to love this guy." Because he said all of the
The
right
right
things.
things.
He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm getting on the field, I'm putting in my work, and I thank God for the talent." I mean, all the things that I'm like, Sean McDermott is, exploding with joy over the thought of getting this guy, right?
Hmm.
Even though, the limited production, only in his last year did he have numbers to speak of. I think it's about his fitness, his ability, his upside, his attitude. Those are all plus things, and those are absolutely places where I think the Bills could say, you know what, our guy is Xavier Legette, and if
Hmm.
we don't pick him here, one of
We're
these
not gonna
next
get him.
couple of teams is going to, right?
Hmm.
And it absolutely would not surprise me and would not disappoint me if the Bills pick Legette here, right?
Hmm.
That's your guy, go get him.
Go get him.
My best case scenario is the trade down and you end up getting two of these guys, right? In
Hmm.
some scenarios that we've done in the past or talked about, we've gotten both Xaviers, Xavier Legette and Xavier Worthy, right? So you get some speed, some
What
activity.
what spot? What's the sweet spot? What's the trade downs? What's the number
Yeah, I
that you
think
have to trade down to acquire both those
you're
players?
talking about at least you've got to get into the top 10 of round two in my mind. And
Hmm.
even then, you have to see how it's going to then predict, okay, do we have to use some of our other collateral, that second round pick next year? Can we
Hmm.
give that away to then move up and make sure we get the guy,
Hmm.
both of them, right? Get
Hmm.
two of these wide receivers in this draft. So
Hmm.
by trading down, we could still end up getting Lad McConkey in that area, and our choice of,
Xavier.
probably Xavier Worthy or Xavier Legette would probably be gone by then, I would assume.
Yeah.
So or Pearsall, right? There's so many
I love
guys here.
Pearsall. I
Yeah,
really like,
there's
yeah,
so many
love
guys
Pearsall.
here that I would be happy getting. Coleman is not one of them. I think he's too polarizing. I've
Hmm.
heard a lot about Roman Wilson. I think that he could be a good player, but Pearsall really intrigues me.
Yeah,
Xavier Legette
Pearsall.
and Xavier Worthy, obviously.
Hmm.
I really think that that would be best case scenario. And even if they stick and pick at 28, one of those guys, I'm still looking to trade up into the second round using next year's second
Mm.
round pick because
Ooh,
we have two of them to
I like
try
it.
and get
Be
the
aggressive.
guy another one of those guys. Yes. So again, yeah, I think trade down. Brandon Bean is using every millisecond on the clock right now to
Mm-hmm.
do that. But if we're here and we're picking, you and I seem to agree, Lad McConkey is that pick.
Hmm.
Again, Xavier Worthy would be my next choice, I
Hmm.
think,
I will.
of the wide receivers at this point. One guy we didn't mention that I've seen mocked to the Bills a lot that is still on the board is Chop Robinson, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I do think that edge is a position that the Bills need. And some of these top guys, if they're still there, the Bills are going to have a tough time picking one of those wide receivers that they think could go in the second.
Hmm.
And especially if they like a bunch of them without picking a edge player who they had higher ranked up here in this position. So would I like it? No, it wouldn't be my favorite pick. But if
Not
they
the
got
favorite.
Chop Robinson, you're getting a dude. You're getting a
You
real
getting a dude.
player who's
Hmm.
going to contribute this year at a
Hmm.
premium position. However, and you're definitely aiming to get one or two of those guys in the second round. To me, that would put the pressure on to do so. So I'd be great with getting a Chop Robinson here, trading down, trading up to get two more receivers in the second round, and really be set moving forward. So that's another guy that I've seen mocked to the Bills a lot, and I'm not mad about at this
Hmm.
spot. I want it to be a wide receiver, but again, looking at this board, there's a lot of different ways this could play out, and that's just one of the scenarios. So, any other thoughts before we quickly finish up the rest of this first round mock draft here?
Nah, I think I like the receiver we selected. I like Lad McConkey. I think he's
Mm-hmm.
a safe pick, potential high ceiling. Xavier Legette was a thought, and I think Xavier Worthy was another thought. I think him being on the field just opens up so much stuff underneath, which what the Bills really want to work. So Xavier Worthy, I wasn't a fan earlier on, but I've grown to really like him in the dimension he
Speed,
provides.
yeah.
So yeah, so I really like Xavier Worthy for the Bills as well. But Lad McConkey is an excellent choice.
Yes, and I mean, there's again multiple options there that I would be happy with, and a few that I would be angry with. So we'll see
Mhm.
how it works out on
You see how
draft
it works
night.
out.
Obviously, we want to be on the happy side, and we want to be celebrating. And
Mhm.
again, join us live next week. It'll
Mhm.
be Akeem and I all night long for that
Mhm.
round one of the draft, going pick by pick, just like we are tonight in the actual draft. And we're going to have guests joining us all throughout the night from
Mhm.
Built in Buffalo team, from outside,
Mhm.
coming in, giving us their perspective. Always through a Bills lens, obviously, on this network, but also just all around the NFL and what does it mean for the NFL in general and each of these teams and their needs. So
Mhm.
hopefully we've been able to give you a preview of that tonight and show you what it's going to be like. And man, you got to tune in with us next week because we're going to have a lot of fun.
A
And
lot of
you
fun.
could sit here and watch it with us, and we'll put your comments up, and we'll discuss and
Mhm.
go through and see how we compare and match up with the picks that we make versus who's actually picked on the board. And it's always fun on draft night. It's one of the most exciting times of the year. So please tune in next week with us. You will not be disappointed. I promise you. So join us then. We'll talk again at the close here, but we've got a few more picks to make, Akeem.
Mhm.
So let's do it now.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Who we got the Lions on the clock, right? Guard, center, edge, cornerback. Man, I'm telling you, I edge. I think Chop Robinson going to the Lions. It sounds like they would just be on that defensive line would be a terror to go up against, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I could see them going, toward the interior offensive line, given who's still on the board here. If you're the Lions, who do you think? Which direction do you think they go? Offense or defense? Offensive line or edge?
Oh man, it's tough, man. I like Chop Robinson here. I like the possibilities of Aiden Hutchinson on one side and Chop Robinson on the other side. And he doesn't have to command that immediate stardom right away. They can work him in,
Yeah.
ease him in. They got Marcus Davenport still, which I don't think is the guy, but he's still a fine rotational player that can play that role while they ease in an explosive guy like Chop Robinson. Can you imagine Aiden Hutchinson and Chop Robinson as your bookend defensive ends in the NFC North? The opponents, it'll be a long day. So I like Chop Robinson there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I made him the pick because I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a very Lions pick in my mind, right? Like very,
Mm-hmm.
very
Mm-hmm.
mindset of the Lions to
Mm-hmm.
attack, right?
Yeah,
Bite
yeah.
those kneecaps,
Kneecaps.
baby.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. So
Yep.
we've got the Baltimore Ravens coming up next at pick 30. Wide receiver and offensive line, the big needs here, with the names that are still on the board, I think they could go that direction. Obviously, edge always could sneak in there. But if it's me picking, I'm looking at AD Mitchell, who's still here, and thinking, my God, AD
Mm-hmm.
Mitchell in an offense like the Ravens have. I mean, could that be a match? Wow, especially if he reaches
Mm-hmm.
that ceiling level.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side of that, you could say his attitude and everything could be a problem there. I don't know. Again, we're not in the interviews with these guys, so I don't know what they're flagging or not. However, I like the pick of AD Mitchell there for the Ravens. But offensive line wise, is there a guy jumping out to you that you might pick? Let's go.
Yeah, go check
Let's
check it
put in
out.
the let's put in both interior and tackle for them
Mm-hmm.
and see who comes up here. So Mims, obviously a big name still on the board.
Mm-hmm.
Barton, who I think will go in the first round. We have not picked him yet. And then you have a few
Mm-hmm.
other names here. Is there one that jumps out to you that might be a good fit for Baltimore, or should we stick with wide receiver?
Uh,
Unless you wanted to look at cornerback and edge too. I mean, we
I
could.
mean, not really. At this point, I'm thinking offensive tackle or I'm thinking wide receiver. I really like, I like Mims here. I think they do need an offensive tackle. They lost Morgan Moses this offseason to the New York Jets, so he would definitely fill a need. But man, it would be hard for me to pass on AD Mitchell at this point. I can pair AD Mitchell with Zay Flowers and have Mark Andrews. I think they would put pressure on opposing defenses in all levels with those type of players. So I'm going AD Mitchell here. And plus, I would hate for AD Mitchell, even though he has concerns. I would hate for him to go to Chiefs. So let's let him let's go to Baltimore.
I mean, that's still again, that's a great matchup,
Hmm.
great place for him to land.
Hmm.
AD Mitchell, you know, with Lamar Jackson throwing him the ball, that could be a special thing moving forward. So still would affect our Bills negatively, but not quite as painful as him going to
Hmm.
Kansas City and end up being a star. So now we have on the clock the San Francisco 49ers needed offensive line and cornerback here.
Hmm.
Obviously a lot of names still on the board. Is there one to you think is the match here? I've talked about Barton, who I thought is going to go in this round, but Mims is still up there too. I
Hmm.
mean, interior wise, you've got a few names up there as well. Defensive backs, I think, have kind of weaned from that first round mentality here in my mind.
Hmm.
I guess the top one on PFF's board here is still the cornerback from Michigan here, but
Hmm.
I don't know. What do you think?
I'm thinking tackle here for the San Francisco 49ers. I think that's the immediate need for them. So I really like the kid from Georgia here, Amarius Mims for the San Francisco 49ers. I know they have other positions to fill. You can think about the interior offensive line. You could go cornerback, but
Mm-hmm.
Mims is the best player on the board, in my opinion.
Yeah, and to get a player like that this late on a team that is, was the best team in the NFC last year and is probably the consensus going into this year, that is, an amazing pick for them this late. You could
Hmm.
see him starting just that stalwart offensive line, the way
Hmm.
they play football, run the ball, right? And,
Hmm.
limit the passing, but get it done. You have Brock Purdy. I mean, that to me is a great fit for sure. Um, so with the last pick is Kansas City here. Now we got to play. We got to do the thing we don't want to do, right? We hope I certainly hope they pick tackle, right? Because that would just, I don't even care if it's a good player and they end up with him. But if we go the wide receiver route, you're talking about taking a player that directly affects the Bills here, right? You chose to go Lad McConkey. We chose to
Mm-hmm.
go Lad McConkey, right? And now
Mm-hmm.
that leaves somebody in the lap of the Kansas City Chiefs. That could be Xavier Legette, who you and I talked highly about. And damn, would I hate that, right? I do not want Legette to go there. That could be, who knows, Xavier Worthy.
Xavier Worthy.
God,
Mm-hmm.
you talk about that speed with that
Mm-hmm.
offense. Man, that could be something, right? Um, it just, to me, there's so much overlap here with the Bills in terms of that need at wide receiver and what the Bills choose or don't choose to do that is going to affect the Kansas City pick here. Um, I think that I would like them to go tackle. I've
Me
talked
too.
about Barton and said that
Me
I think
too.
he could go in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think wide receiver is, the more likely pick here? And well, let's start here. Which wide receiver do you think the Chiefs would be looking at in this situation? I think it could be Legette. I think it could be Worthy. I think those would be the two guys that they're saying, if we want that speed factor, we want to be the team to pick Worthy before anybody else gets the chance in the
Mm-hmm.
second round. But you still have a guy like Legette, who we've talked about climbing boards with his ability, and with his everything he's proven in the route running. 1 year of production, yes, but high upside. I'm on the fence with those two, I think, for Kansas City. Is there somebody else that jumps out to you that you think they might be looking at? Or
Man, it's tough. It's tough because these are players I wouldn't want the Kansas City
exactly.
Chiefs to select. But another guy I'm looking at is Jalen Polk as well.
Yes.
I think he can be a possibility at the end of the first round. Contested catch guy. He just strong hands. His physicality. Um, Rashee Rice having that situation
Yes.
is I think really upped the
Puts the
ante.
pressure on. Yeah.
Yeah, for the Kansas City Chiefs to select the receiver first round. I'm thinking they're going to go Xavier Worthy with this pick.
Woo! Give him the
They
speed, huh?
he's not the dog per se like Tyreek Hill was, but he gives them some reminders of a Tyreek Hill, some flashes, and having an Xavier Worthy to pair with a Patrick Mahomes once again can be a tremendous thing for that Kansas City Chiefs organization. So I would go Xavier Worthy here for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yes, and I agree that this could be the spot where they're like, you know what, we don't pick for a long time, and we want that speed element back in this offense. And the fastest guy in this draft
Mm-hmm.
is Worthy, and he's going to be the one to get it done, right? So, I unfortunately like that fit for Kansas City. I think he
Yes.
could be a big play guy there. Let's hope they pick tackle instead, and it ends up being an okay tackle instead of a
Right.
difference making wide receiver. But again, like you said, with what the offseason antics that have gone on with Rice, I think that's only going to increase the need at wide receiver for them, and the feel that they do need to take their guy there. So
Definitely.
Worthy, I think, would be an upgrade there. So certainly impactful. So that's our round one mock draft tonight, folks. The Bills end up going Lad McConkey, wide receiver from Georgia. I like the pick there for them. I wouldn't be mad with that.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, the board fell in a way where if the Bills wanted to trade up, it probably wouldn't have been for a wide receiver, because most of the guys that we were eyeing, all of them, all four, I would say, went in the top 9 of this draft, this mock draft. So that tells you that wide receiver, although a deep and premium position in this specific draft, you
Mm-hmm.
either have to go all in or you're sitting and picking. And again, we still had our choice at 28, which
Mm-hmm.
makes me happy and
Mm-hmm.
makes me believe that could end up being the scenario, because
Mm-hmm.
there wasn't a lot of options to trade down, which is what I actually wanted to do. So good on the Bills for getting their guy. And in round 2, after this draft, if I'm the Bills, I'm still looking wide receiver and potentially, obviously the other positions of need like edge and interior defensive line, depending on who's on the board and how you feel about them. But certainly wide receiver. And I'm putting in play that second round pick along with some other picks to get 2 guys in the second round if possible. And that would make my draft pretty successful in my mind for the Bills. But who knows what'll happen on draft night. We're 1 week away, folks. The live draft. We will be here on the Hoof on Built in Buffalo, doing the live analysis of the real NFL draft next
Mhm.
week. We will be on starting at 7:30. The picks start rolling in at 8 o'clock, and we're going to go all the way through to the end of the first round and
Mhm.
give our analysis at that time after. So we're in it for the long haul, ladies and gentlemen. You heard a preview tonight. We're really excited. We've looked into these guys. It's always a fun time to see where they land. Obviously,
Mhm.
we're excited to see which direction the Bills go and our rivals, and we'll be giving you all of that analysis next week. Anything to add, Akeem, that I missed?
No, man, not at all. I think tonight was a excellent segue to next week's actual NFL draft, and I think we did a pretty good job here. Now, of course, I've seen some people in the comment section the way Brian Thomas Jr. goes 9. You never know. You
Yeah.
never know. Every year there are players that end up being first round picks that none of us mocked as first round picks. So I don't see any difference this year. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Again, Anthony did a great job narrating this. Just be on the lookout. Built in Buffalo draft special next Thursday. And we're going to be doing all 3 days. So please tune in and buckle up, man, because it's going to be a fun ride. Anthony, this was fun, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Can't wait. We're doing the countdown till next week now. We'll be doing it again together. So looking forward to that. And as always, you can like, subscribe, follow us, comment. I'm active on Twitter and Facebook and love to
Mhm.
see comments and interact and see where everybody's heads are at before
Mhm.
the draft, leading up to, during the draft. You'll be able to come in and comment live and super chat and all that good stuff. So please come in and join us. We're going to be excited and bring the energy for sure that night.
Yes, sir.
And I got a special thing happening that night. The Bills suit is coming back, ladies and gentlemen. For those Hoof listeners who have been with us from the beginning, the Bills suit will be back for draft night and special occasions. So we're breaking it back out again. Thank you for joining us tonight, tuning in. Again, like, comment, subscribe, tell us what you think. Join us next week for the Hoof live mock draft. And as always, thanks for kicking it with us.
Go Bills.